Humans are always small before what nature causes. Floods are one of the most brutal natural disasters that humans have to face. History has recorded many terrible floods, causing thousands of deaths and extensive destruction of property. A tornado is formed in the middle of the sea. This is a bad signal. The tornado quickly blew to the shore, causing many people to flee, and tents were overturned. Looking at the water, it looks very calm, but a part of the land has been split with a strong impact. The mainland was quickly swept away, and the water flooded in more and more. According to experts, the groundwater has created a deep hole, causing part of the land to become eroded. Therefore, the new mainland was submerged by the river. Trees and houses were all swept away, but fortunately, no humans appeared. This can be considered a terrifying natural disaster. This causes people to not have time to react. Aghast, a huge flood is flowing. The floodwater engulfed anything it passed, including steel pillars embedded deep into the ground. This shows the terrible power of this flood. Amid the frightened cries of local people, a brutal flood suddenly arrived. The storm's appearance was so unexpected that people here were unable to respond. The flood swept down on the village, and it quickly invaded this land. Its flowing speed is faster than any car. The flood flooded the main road, sweeping away cars, houses, and trees. The flood spread more and more. In a short time, everything was submerged. The sea level suddenly rose, and ships were swept away by the current. The water surface rose with strong waves. The seawater flowed rapidly and poured heavily into the urban area, surprising the people. The water swept away all the nearby cars. The floodwaters even swept away high-rise buildings, creating an absolute mess. People in this urban area had been notified of natural disasters in advance, so they can promptly respond. Water poured into the urban area very quickly. The water level was higher than 2 meters. In the distance, there is a ship being swept away by the current. The flood shows no signs of stopping. The terrible flood suddenly fell on a village in Japan. This horrifying scene had shocked the locals. After the historic heavy rain, floodwater from above poured into the village right at the foot of the mountain. Wherever the flood goes, houses and roads collapse. The strong flow of the flood water made a huge hole appear on the road. The black hole is like a giant monster, swallowing everything the flood brings. Roads, trees, and even large 2-story red house collapsed. The flood caused serious damage to the city. Until the flood had passed, it was difficult for the city to fully recover. The flood happened very quickly, and the water flow was very strong. The river suddenly poured in from upstream, creating a large flood. The water moved down the slope with great force. At the speed, the flood will wash away everything it passes. When it rains a lot of the time, the rainwater will not have time to seep into the ground. If the ground is saturated, drainage is even more difficult. Water will begin to move from the hills downhill with extremely strong forces, causing flash floods. Along with climate change, natural disasters are increasingly fierce, unusual, and difficult to predict. Heavy rain continued to pour down, causing this flood to subside before a new flood came. Unbelievable! The soil erosion and the rainwater stagnates on the falling mountain, causing an entire natural forest to be swept away. Prolonged heavy rain caused a high mountain to suddenly collapse. This landslide was more intense than imagined, and onlookers at the foot of the mountain had to flee. This is an extremely dangerous and deadly natural disaster. Due to heavy rain, traffic in the city was delayed for many days. These two bridges are very long and have an important task in traffic. Once the bridge has problems, travel becomes difficult. The panorama of two broken bridges, completely isolating areas deep inside. A disaster is a negative impact after the actual occurrence of a natural disaster, in the event that it causes significant harm to the community. Even though this red car tried to fight, it was still swept away by the force of the flood flow. This force of the flood flow is very strong. Natural disasters can be aggravated by improper construction standards. The city's drainage system does not operate effectively. That creates conditions for water levels to overflow into every corner of the city. Overcoming the consequences of natural disasters later will be even more difficult. A natural disaster is a disaster that can cause loss of life and property. I don't know where the floodwater came from and slowly poured into the apartment building and poured out like a giant waterfall. Natural disasters can cause loss of life, property damage and environmental damage. The various phenomena of natural disasters are all natural hazards that bring extremely serious consequences. Climate change and unstable terrain, plus deforestation, make disaster-prone areas even more vulnerable. Developing countries suffer more or less from constant natural disasters. Natural disasters, even if they occur in places where no people live, will still be more or less bring bad effects to people. Planting trees and creating forests are always effective measures to improve quality of life and prevent natural disasters. This car's trying to escape before the flood comes. But luckily the flood flowed along a different path, so the car was able to escape. Rainwater accumulates upstream for many days, flowing along the river. The water flowing to the end of the road is still strong. And the flood came crashing down on a construction project. In the United States, ships were moored when suddenly a violent waves landed in an unusual place. A disaster is a negative impact after the actual occurrence of a natural disaster, in the event that it causes significant harm to the community. The severity of the damage depends on the resilience of the affected population and the available infrastructure. Earthquakes, landslides, volcanic eruptions, floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, blizzards, tsunamis, wildfires and pandemics. Natural hazards are not something humans can control. Rapid population growth, coupled with harmful environmental emissions, have increased the severity of disasters. Recent years, under the impact of climate change, natural disasters have become increasingly complex and unusual. Natural disasters are extreme natural phenomena that may be beyond human control. Types of natural disasters are increasingly happening irregularly. In the past, natural disasters were seasonal, but now occur all year round, even during months that are considered rare. Therefore, every year the world records numbers of humans and property damages. Natural disasters tend to appear with increasing frequency, accompanied by unusual factors that scientists have not yet found answers to. Flood is a phenomenon that frequently occurs when water in rivers and lakes floods an area of land. In addition, flooding can also be a phenomenon of flooding caused by the impact of a high tide and sudden sea level rise. Since then, the flood destroys buildings, houses, vehicles and property where it passes. Like this flood, even bringing rocks into the city. The image's car drifting along in water and disappearing into a vortex is always haunting. The damage caused by natural disasters is very heavy. The impact of natural disasters is a particular concern in urban areas, where the population is densely populated. Strong wind rose, cars travelling on the road had to find temporary shelter. However, there were cars that could not be moved in time, so they had to fight the storm. Only the owner of the car running in the direction of the wind can leave. The torrential downpour split the bridge into two halves. In just a few minutes, floodwater poured down the entire bridge. Natural disasters are becoming more unpredictable and extreme, and people have had to find effective response methods as quickly as possible.